on this pedestal sometimes, and he's so human. He really is when you look closely. So he says to God, show me your face. Show me, it literally says, show me your kavod, which is often translated as your glory, whatever that means. Show me your glory. Sounds awfully personal. But the translation, I'll take her anywhere. So, the way I understand it is he's saying, I want to see you face to face. We've been talking, we've been communicating, you've given me these tablets, but, and God says, a human being cannot see my face, God's face, and live. Which I've always understood to mean, you might, even if you saw my face, you can't possibly understand me.
Well, that's taking, again, see my face, that's putting you back into a human form.
But that's what I'm trying to show, that this becomes metaphor. So stay with me here. Okay? Stay with me. If we try to read it literally, it doesn't really teach us anything. Right? For me to read in a book, Moses says to God, I want to see your face. Show me your face. What does that teach me for how I should live my life today? Nothing. And to me, any passage in the Torah, any passage in the tradition, in the sources, that isn't teaching me something, what good is it? I don't need it. But I believe that everything there has something to teach me, and so it becomes my job, it's our job, as a community, as a tradition, as we've been doing for 4,000 years, to find meaning. So what does it mean when Moses says to God, show me your face? I want to see you personally. To me, what it means is, boy, I really wish I could understand God. Exactly what we're doing here today, right? Nothing's changed. As they say in ancient Yiddish, Plus Hashem, Plus
What happens when we heal the world?
Let me finish what I'm working on here,
Yeah.
and then we'll come back to that, please.
Yes.
I'm in the middle of a story here. We'll come back to that. So God says to Moses, a human being cannot see me and live. What does that mean metaphorically for me? There's no way to understand God. Right? You're stuck with it. However, what does God then say to Moses? Moshe, I'll make you a special. There's a cleft in the rock over there. Go hide behind the rock. I'm going to pass by. And after I've passed by, you can peek out through the cleft in the rock and see my... Now, here we get translation issues. The word in Hebrew is achorai. That is very often in the English translations translated as my back. Well, again, if we're trying to get away from the anthropomorphisms, that doesn't do me a whole lot of good. It's a correct translation as far as it goes. But another perfectly legitimate translation of this Hebrew word, achorai, is behind me or after me. What can I get from that? What I get from that is God is like the wind. You can't actually see the wind. You can only see things that the wind is blowing around. You cannot see God, but you can see the effect that God has had where God has been. And how is God in a particular place? By the way we act.
And that's his omnipresence.
And that's God's omnipresence. I have no problem with repeating the word God as many times as I have to avoid using pronouns. Willie.
Correctly, I think we focused on the personal, the internal, but to me, is external, God in nature.
Right.
I'm glad you did touch on that. You know, the awesomeness that is invoked by the sunrise, or, you know, the million things on a daily basis, spider web, you name it, there's, you know, all this movement and all these miracles in nature that to me have something to do with that.
This gets into a tricky area of theology called pantheism, which is a theological position, and it really means more than just the shorthand of pantheism is the idea that everything in nature is God.
Omnipresent.
The problem is, if we say everything in nature is God, what we're doing is making those things God. And that comes very close to... Wait, please, wait. Stay on your knees. There's a difference, and it's a subtle point, and I admit it. Maybe, we shouldn't even be going there today because it's a long lead-up. But there is another philosophy, another theology that's very close to that, called panentheism, which means that instead of saying everything is God, what we're saying is God is in everything. And there's a difference. It's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference.
I would like to say,
Louder.
please, I would like to say that, as we've talked before, that I'm in total agreement with what Louis says in my own personal place. But instead of saying that everything in nature is God, I would rather think of it as it's an energy that is in nature, and it's a verb.
And that's the panentheism that I just mentioned.
And is that what Judaism calls the Shekinah, which is God as present on
That's certainly
earth?
one common
That's what I was thinking of when Lily was talking. It was one of our ways of looking at God.
That's certainly one of the very common uses of the Hebrew word Shekhinah. It really began life more as a mystical term, and needs a much broader discussion as well for another day. But yes, that's certainly one of the ways that it's used. In the same way that Christians talk about the Holy Spirit, the Shekhinah is often, especially in a Kabbalistic sense, really equivalent to the Christian idea of the Holy Spirit, the indwelling presence of God in what appears in us. That's right.
I am a pantheist, I guess, basically. But I think another way to do that, the way I see it, is instead of saying God is nature, nature is part of God. There's also another whole, the God that we often think of God being a separate God from nature, but it also is nature, it's also us. Like, sort of like I sometimes think of it in terms of the human body. The God we think of is like the brain. It's controlling it all, but it's not separate. It's not something outside. It's part.
Based on what you just said, my friend, you are not a pantheist, you are an entheist, which is perfectly acceptable in the Jewish
And understand Kabbalism better than modern.
And I think of the description that nature is God rather than nature being God. I think of it as the God would be our appreciation of nature.
That would work, sure.
Could we get back to what Rachel asked a few minutes ago?
Remind
What was that?
What happens when the time comes that we have reached Tikkun Olam, when we have healed the world? Then what do we do?
Then we have another chat.
That's when we all become
yeah, and it's, yeah. It's it's only been 3,500 years since Sinai. What's your hurry? These things take time.
Deal with the ring.
There's a passage in a part of the Talmud called Pirkei Avot Ethics of the Fund, which says, yes, the work is great, and the boss is insistent. Again, I'm paraphrasing. But you are not expected to complete the task, but neither are you free to desist from it. In other words, there really is no expectation this is going to happen anytime soon.
But you gotta try.
But you got to try.
Contribute.
Contribute. And, you know, no one person is expected to fix it all. Not doable. But, golly gee whiz, if each one of us did what we could, what we can, in our little corner of the world, how fast would that add up?
So the follow-up question, Rabbi, is if God is all-powerful and omniscient and everything else, why doesn't God heal the world? If he made it, he can heal it.
All right. And the short answer to that, because that's all we have time for, right? There are whole libraries that have been written in response to that question. This is the classic problem of theology, of any religion, is if God is all-powerful and all good, why is there evil in the world? Book of Job, right, is the classic statement of this issue in the Bible. Why is there evil in the world? Okay. And the philosophers, the theologians who go into this area talk about there are really two different kinds of evil, in a sense. One is human evil, the other might be called natural evil, such as people getting killed in an earthquake or Katrina, yeah, anything like that. Okay, why can't God direct the weather so that people didn't die in New Orleans 10 years ago? The short answer to that is given by many theologians who deal in this area, is God doesn't micromanage the weather. God created the world, created a set of rules for, call them laws of physics, laws of nature. Set it going, and it is what it is. The people who say, you know, who come out of, say, a car accident where somebody was killed, but they survived, thank God that God protected me. I'm sorry, I have no patience for that kind of person. What makes them better than the person who got killed? The short answer to the problem of human evil is that it's the price we pay for having free will. Michael, you have something.
Well, you covered most of it, but
Get a grade.
no, but I think it goes back to Marcius.
Yeah.
Who is God is in us, but I don't think it's a goal to have the world in peace and harmony.
Sure.
But that's a goal. That's a goal that we all have in us. I think goals. For myself, I use the term journey. I'm on a journey.
Yes.
And I think each one of us is on our own journey in life. And we have expectations for ourselves. And if we set them high enough, we won't reach them. But that's because that gives us the incentive to be better people. But some people are evil because they are. And, God has nothing to do with it. God really doesn't have anything to do with it.
They have a different journey.
Well, it's,
Well,
God's not better because Willie hasn't heard.
Good.
I just have back to Rachel. I think putting the labels all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present, those are just adjectives that we're just throwing at it.
There we go, defining
We're trying
God.
to define, exactly, we're trying to define the undefinable. So when you put those words on there, you're putting a lot of load onto your definition that are just words. Those are just adjectives. And you can, one time when I was at a session, and we came up with 100 words that are commonly used to describe God. But they're just words. They're human words. We have no idea that God is all-powerful, all-present. It's not
The leading theologian of the conservative movement, Rabbi Neil Gilman, once wrote that when it comes to understanding the true nature of God, we are all agnostics. That's right.
Also, if God truly is omnipotent, all-powerful, who can do this, and He created us all, then He obviously created a world in which hurricanes or whatever, or in which people have the will to do this. So He obviously intended for there to be evil. I'm using the word He obviously
Well,
intended.
another way of understanding this whole question comes down to this. I mean, it's a shorthand and it really needs a greater discussion, but it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you too. God is not about what happens to us. God is about what we do with what happens to us. No, God didn't cause that person to harm you. God didn't cause that storm to drop the tree on my roof. But now what do I do? Do I sit around and feel sorry for myself? Do I blame God for the presence of... No. I get up and I do what has to be done, because that's what, for me, God, meaning, again, my own personal meaning for that, a set of how I act in the world, that's what I have to do. In order to make the world a better place.
God helps those who help themselves.
Bingo. And if we have time, I'll come back to another story about that. Brooke.
Something that spoke to me that, I don't know if it was you, I think it could have been Azariah that said at the last Torah study, was I think I had fallen into the trap of thinking of God as a human, and the word that was used was, we are His pets. Like, why can't God be like a pet? And you we're in it together. And that's what, because I think I had done this whole, well, why can't he or she or whatever fix everything? Like, we're just pets for his amusement or whatever.
That is not at all a Jewish feeling. It never comes from.
But it should be a bit clear.
Lower being that is controlling, and that's not...
Is that like dog is my co-pilot?
Yes. I don't want to bring up another topic, but I think it might be an ending thought, is that, we talk about the house of God, but is God really there until we get there and pray, or come together, or like this? I feel God is present here because He's within us, and we're all sharing, and not only an intellectual, but a very spiritual and emotional sense.
There is a story, a teaching story, about a rabbi who says to his students, "Where is God?" Like I got lost or something. Where is God? And they, the students kind of look around, they give the same answers that we would probably give. Well, God is everywhere. And the rabbi says, God's in heaven. No. All right, Rabbi, where is God? God is wherever we let God in. To which I add to the story, if we're not letting God in, God may as well not be there for all the impact it's going to have on the place. Right? So, my own feeling is, I agree with that.
But it does give us a lot of power.
You bet it does. Yes, it does. We human beings, it has been said, we're part animal. We're also part divine. It has been said that we human beings are where those two worlds meet. We spend an awful lot of our time doing animal stuff, the basic stuff to survive, right? And often sleepwalk through our daily routines of doing those things, which nobody can put a value judgment on that, because we all do it and it's very normal. What any religion at its best will do, and certainly Judaism at its best can do, is become a big toolbox for living more mindfully. Nobody's ever going to live mindfully in terms of mindfulness, mindful of the presence of God every minute of their lives. We're human. We're not capable of that. But includes for me mindful of the presence of God, whatever that word means. I think I'm going to have a better life. I think I'm going to be able to contribute more to a better world. There's a story about, well, there were some other hands. I got stories.
So the purpose of prayer really isn't obviously praying during external times, but allowing us to tune in to that quiet, God-like presence within us.
That's certainly one of the ways of looking at Jewish prayer. There are people who think of God in a more external way, and for them prayer becomes a more external communication. One thing that prayer is not is asking for a new bicycle or a new income. Appropriate, well, right. The word in Hebrew for the verb to pray, which is in the Hebrew liturgy for the high holidays fairly frequently, L'hitpalel. If you dig down deep in the meaning of the root, the linguistic root of that word in Hebrew, you get something along the lines of to accuse oneself. And see, this is what I'm hoping that I have been able to share some of it with you today, and what I hope to share in later chats in Adult Ed is so much in the tradition that, if understood, doesn't mean what we always thought it did. It can mean many very, I think, very helpful ideas, very helpful things. I want to come back to something, Adrian, that you said earlier when we were talking about God as person, place, or thing, and the idea of God as place. One of the many, many, many names for God, not a name, but more of a title, a descriptive title. Hamakom. Makom means place.
Ha means please.
And Ha means the, right. The place. The place of what? Well, I've struggled with that for a long time about what does that really mean. Something that's helped me is the Buddhist idea. And classic Buddhism does not posit a God the same way that Western religions do. But there is something that is referred to sometimes in English discussions about Buddhist concepts of a ground of being on which the world stands.
I was thinking the same thing. The giant turtle.
That God, one of the many, many ways that we can think of as a metaphor for God is in all of these things we've been talking about, all of these different ideas, all of these potential frameworks where some's going to work for some people and others are going to work for other people, and maybe none of it, maybe for some people none of it works at all, but hopefully it'll get you started in your own journey, in your own search, because there is no goal at the end. The goal is being on the journey. So if you think of Hamakom as a metaphor for God, God can become where I stand metaphorically in living my life in a way that I want to contribute as a partner with God in the ongoing project of completing creation, of bringing order out of chaos, otherwise known as Tikkun.
I'd like to, excuse me, God in Judaism accepts failure. If we learn from it, you can't get ahead and do better without failure. That's a process of success.
Well, and this is something that's very...
And I compared a little bit to sin, too, because I think he accepts sin if you learn.
Well, and this is very central to the high holidays that we're about to go into. This idea that, you know, when we stand before God on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, you know, God does not expect us to be perfect. Because nobody knows better than God, who made us this way, that we are human and therefore not perfect. Right? And so, what God expects from us on Yom Kippur is not to come in and claim we're perfect, but to come in and claim, yeah, I messed up. I missed the mark. But what I'm going to do, I'm recognizing that. That's step one. That I'm not perfect. That I have made a mistake. Step two is, when that same situation comes up again in the new year, I'm going to do my best to do better. And that's all the tradition, all that God wants from us. Different was better, sure.
Administrative point before you continue here. All these chairs that got out here, primarily Lenny and Mike and a few others that get here early set up, to the extent that you can, please help them put them back in these two classrooms. That poor teacher there every Monday thinks we're stolen all the chairs. But they kind of know where they got them from, and it makes it better. If the chair monitors show you where to put them, we got to do that every week after we get complaints.
Okay, I'm going to set up at one of these tables my books. If anybody would like to purchase a book, it's $16, and I'll be happy to sign it at no extra.
Blue chair's got an 11 class. All night. Blue chairs. They need to go where they're going. But they know what. He did good things.
Okay.
Glad you can get it.
Respect each other's
I'm not used to this.
Oh, yeah. It's
Absolutely. Oh, I'm sure. Oh, with their kids? No, there's your joke. She's not that. Oh, there's a joke. There's a joke.
Hi there. Good to see you. My very first senior meeting.
Good. So I'll bring it on Tuesday. Oh, boy. Yeah, we just went to a
Oh, really? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you like to remember which I think you're right.
Well,